When did Ireland become so racist? And I don't say that lightly. There are very set facts around the rise of far-right extremism, of authoritarianism, of conservatism in Ireland, and they have an awful lot more to do with the actions of the state rather than the actions of individuals. So I really do feel hugely sad for the treatment that's been meted out to migrant communities here, to Black Irish people, to anyone that's different. But these have always been inherent in Irish society, and they've been there since the formation of the state. So nationalism, which gives us our pride in being Irish, our harking back to traditional Irish pastimes and values and all of the good things, but it also seeks to separate us out from what we are not. And because of the formation of the state, like the embedding of kind of traditional Catholic conservative values as part of the foundation of Irish identity, and then like that kind of compounding effect of county boundaries. Like anyone who grew up in Ireland will know that if you move if you move cross county borders, you are always a blowing. You're always somebody that came from somewhere else. So that has beget like this kind of elevated sense of the idea of who belongs here and who should be here, who has the legitimacy to be part of the group and the group identity. Now, I don't want to get too into the politics. Fuck. I do want to get into the fucking politics. I want to be really angry about the politics because it's not migrants that have done this. It's not other poor people looking for a better life. It's not different religions. It's not different expressions of being a human. It's not being gay or straight or married or whatever. Budgets focused on austerity. It has been the outsourcing of state services to the charity sector. It has been like a kind of abdication of responsibility around numerous aspects of inequality, of social support, and, dare I say it, of care for. So traditionally, political, boundaries were kind of mediated by two main parties, and now those two main parties are basically just the same party with slightly different branding. So this has kind of created a gap in the market for right-wing authoritarianism, and that really started to embed around COVID, right? So there was a study done between Queen's University Belfast and the UK, looking at the rise in anti-migrant, attitudes and behaviours, because remember, these people are on keyboards all the time. And that was mediated by the threat posed by a virus, right? So this is quite an interesting thing, that it's not necessarily the threat posed by migrants or people of colour or different religions or anything like that. It is any threat perceived, right? So those threats, obviously, in the current Irish state, you've got housing crisis, cost of living crisis. Everything is more expensive. It is really hard to get by, and so those are all threats. So it makes sense, in an awful way, for people to try and find somewhere really easy to put that, put the blame for all of these problems, which are systemic failures by government. They're not caused by migrants. I know, weird, huh? Right, so where does this come from? So it's important to note that right-wing authoritarianism doesn't necessarily mean they're politically right-wing. It means they have a set of like psychological, personality preferences and behaviours that kind of, predispose them to wanting things to be like they were in the past. But as we know about the past wasn't perfect either. However, in a conservative worldview, the past was better. Women knew their place. Everyone was straight. Things were lovely. We drank milk out of bottles, and so it's kind of like wanting to go back to this sort of imagined, idealized state, where things were as they were. But as we all know, living in the real world, it's kind of impossible. So, what are the characteristics of these people? These, are very busy on keyboards now, bullying some lovely young girl in Dublin for winning the Rose of the Dublin Rose. Right, so cognitive rigidity is the first one. So even when presented evidence which contradicts their worldview, they does not compute. So they will ignore, they will defer. If you've ever watched right-wing authoritarians debate, they don't ever answer the question. They just bat them away and talk about whatever they want. So it's kind of a lesson in futility trying to argue directly with them. They have a perception of an inherently dangerous world, and anyone that watches the news, it is a litany of a dangerous world. And of course, in the past, it wasn't a dangerous world. Our children could play in the streets, you know what I mean? So people who are high in right-wing authoritarianism just see the world as a more threatening place than we do. They have an intolerance for ambiguity. And here's where people like me and other scientists and people who try and, give a balanced worldview and say, oh, it's not all this, it's a bit of this, and we're fairly sure it's this. And we can be almost 100% perfectly that's what scientists do. Whereas the leaders, in right-wing authoritarianism, they're very firm. They're very sure about what's going on. They have the answers. And they're going to, lead us out of this quagmire, right? There is an inherent ethnocentrism and prejudice, right? So they want just their people, and they will direct their anger and ire towards racial or ethnic minorities, LGBTQI people, anyone that's expressing themselves in a different way from how they see the world and how they want the world. They're highly punitive. And we've seen with the rise in right-wing authoritarianism in the US, the punitive use of ICE, the detention centres. They are playing exactly to their voter base. They want them punished. They want them in concentration camp type facilities. They don't want migrants to have rights. And over here, you've got they're getting hotels. I'd love to stay in a hotel. You wouldn't like to stay in a hotel for more than a week. You wouldn't like to be stuck in the room with other people or with kids. So all of these things, do you get me, compound. And these are exactly the kinds of rhetoric that, the influencers, can you call them influencers if they're just, well, yes, but they are, use, right? They have a lower openness to experience. So they prefer familiarity and routine. So they're not exactly, they might go on holidays. I always think of, the Brits that go on holidays to Spain and then are horrified that not everything is in English. That sort of attitude. And they have a slightly higher conscientiousness associated with order, structure and security. So they heavy-handed, state interventions, armies, lots of, policing, punishment is the way forward rather than, any sort of addressing of the inequalities that maybe drive crime and, so it is a personality, and preference rather than an actual kind of, a political party. But we are seeing more and more of Irish political parties using this rhetoric and You know, like you think nothing will surprise you anymore, and then that video of you know, a former leader of the country putting the blame after what he did, putting the blame on migrants. So so I hope this was informative, and if these are, you know, the kind of traits that you're seeing in people, you know, these, you know what I mean, these are a result of feeling threatened. So they're feeling threatened for all sorts of reasons, right? You know, because, you know, housing is expensive, everything is expensive, going to the shop is expensive, taxing the car is everything is so costly over here. It is the most expensive country, and I was in 7 countries last year. This place tops them all. So of course there's threat. But instead of putting that threat feeling, you know, like maybe into political action, or, you know, like voting, or, you know, changing the structures, what we're doing is some people are putting it into hating. They're putting it into punishing, disenfranchising, bullying. So, yeah. Next video, we'll talk about how we deal with it.
So if you're living in Ireland and you don't look ethnically Irish, you might be in trouble, because the string of attacks that are now happening to a lot of the minority population has definitely increased. Did you see this news? Did you see this news? What is going on here? This man was attacked while driving his taxi. He was basically in working, contributing to the economy, yet he was attacked and said, go back to your country. These people that actually commit these crimes, what actually do you want? What are you doing to contribute to the economy? What are you doing to make this country better? This is not the country I grew up in. This is not what Ireland stands for. And before you come at me and say, go back to your country, go back to home, listen and listen well. This is my country. This is my home. And you're not going to run me out. This needs to stop, and the government needs to take a stand and do something serious about this, because there's so many attacks happening to so many minority populations. Now it seems to be focused on the Indian population. This was in the news, and then I saw something about a woman, a nurse, that was basically kidnapped by a group of boys and attacked. To anybody that feels like nobody deserves to be in this country, listen and listen good. The world is becoming multicultural. You cannot stop it. You cannot stop it. Everyone, different nationalities, different ethnicities are moving to different parts of the world. So embrace it and contribute positively to the country you're living in.
The new figures today from the police on race hate crime over the last year. For the first time ever, we have hit over 2,000 racially motivated hate incidents in the course of a year, over 1,300 race hate crimes in a year. We know that this 12-month period covers the racist riots last August and the very worrying attacks on migrant families in Ballymena and other towns across Northern Ireland this June. So that's behind those figures are a lot of families living in fear right now. I think it says that we now have a racism problem that frankly is somewhat out of control. This crisis has been developing for years. It hasn't happened in a vacuum, these figures the last 12 months. We've seen them rise year on year. What it means is that those people behind these racist attacks, increasingly feel emboldened to do so, feel a sense of impunity, that they've been able to get away with it for years, and are now increasingly targeting people of colour, migrant families and others for their race hate, often in violent means. Yes, sadly, we are. That is the hard fact of life, that people have been forced from their homes. But the knock-on effect is that people no longer feel safe to send their children to school. We're just about to start a new school year. I think there will be families whose kids will not be turning up at the classroom door because they no longer feel safe in Northern Ireland. For those who remain, they are worried for their children walking to and from school or going to after-school activities. And we have people dropping out from their jobs and maybe moving to England. And that means that we have people sort of leaving jobs in the NHS and the many other areas of life where they help to keep this society going. I think we are now at this crisis level of race hate crime because there has been a sense of complacency from political leadership. There has been ineffectual action from on high. And we now need to see a much more concerted approach from the police, who recently published their 5-year plan to tackle racism within the society. And that is welcome. That will be judged on its success. But from politicians, they put in place a 10-year racial equality strategy. Their own independent review found it to be wholly ineffectual. It lacked proper targets, it lacked proper budgets, and most of all, it lacked proper political leadership. That's about to run out at the end of this year. There's no follow-up plan even in place as we speak. And what needs to come next is something that is much more ambitious, much more effective, and shows much better political leadership than we have had to date. People have been badly let down by our executive. That can't go on, because what happens is that people are being targeted for the colour of their skin, where they're from, and no longer feel that Northern Ireland is a safe place to live.